Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back to Morgan Hill Farms. So our temperatures here have been soaring. We are probably about 85 degrees right now, and our nighttime temperatures are 55 and above at this point. We are in the very beginning of May, and so it is time for me to get my sweet potato slips planted into the garden. So I'm planting these sweet potatoes in my raised beds because the soil here is much looser and more airy than my in-ground garden. You really want to have this nice loose soil for your sweet potatoes to grow. If your soil is too compacted, what can happen is as the tubers grow, they actually get forced up above the ground, and that can leave them susceptible to diseases as well as maybe rodents getting to them. So I always choose to do mine in my raised beds. Now this bed is a 4x8 bed, and I'm just going to start by digging some holes here. I have amended this with about 2 to 3 inches of compost, and I'm hoping to get about 8 to 12 slips per bed. Once my holes are dug, I'm gonna start adding some rock phosphate to each hole. Rock phosphate is going to give you phosphorus for good root development and some calcium. Now I only fertilize at this time when I'm planting. I will not fertilize my sweet potatoes again during any time during their growing season. And that is because fertilizing during the growing season is going to give you nice, big, beautiful leaves and beautiful green foliage, but it's going to divert that energy away from tuber formation, so you won't get a great harvest when you go to get these out of the ground in September or October. I'm using my hose here to really get a lot of water into these holes. Because my sweet potatoes have been rooted in just a jar of water up on my back porch, they're really used to being saturated, and so I want to recreate that in these holes. And I will make sure that they stay very well watered for the first 2 to 3 days. But overall, sweet potatoes really do love the heat, and I really find that I don't have a problem with them ever transitioning out into the garden. So after I've gotten a bunch of water into those holes, I'm just gonna go ahead and choose the slips that I'm gonna put in. I'm looking for ones that have good root systems. If they do not have a good root system, I'm just gonna put that back in the jar, and I'll wait till later to plant those, maybe a few days to a week later. I plant my slips really deep because that soil that's deeper down into the beds is going to stay moister for longer and ensure that they don't dry out. So I always remove the bottom leaves so that those aren't covered in soil. So if you are growing sweet potatoes, you may not know how to get slips for them. So you can a lot of times find them at your local farmers centers, and you can also order them online. However, the quickest and easiest way to do it, I think, is to start them yourself. So you can see I have a 9x13 foil pan that's filled with soil, and I simply nestled in some sweet potatoes into that soil. I keep it on a heat mat, and I keep it really nicely watered, and the sweet potatoes will sprout these slips for you. Now, when they get about, 8 inches or so, I go ahead and pull them off of the sweet potato, and I remove those bottom leaves, and then I will end up putting them in a mason jar that is full of water, and they will start to sprout roots for you, and then you'll be ready to plant them out. You can see here on this slip that I'm about to pull out, you're gonna see where all those little nodes are and all those little roots are starting to develop. I find that this way is the quickest way to start your sweet potato slips. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they will already produce roots for you while they're in this pan. If you're really careful and pull them off, you'll find that some of your sweet potato slips will already have a super great root system already developed for you. Now there is a second way to try and start sweet potatoes inside, and it's simply by placing some toothpicks inside that sweet potato and suspending it in a jar of water, and you'll see that those also produce sprouts for you. However, this way takes much longer. While I was planting my sweet potatoes, I had a couple of the kids come down to the garden to harvest these strawberries. Things are getting quite busy in the garden, so I'm starting to need all the help I can get down here. So we live in South Carolina, and we are in zone 8A, and we have a really long growing season. So sweet potatoes typically take about 120 days before they're ready to harvest. But don't think just because your growing season is shorter that you can't grow these guys. I typically grow Beauregard, which like I said has a 120-day harvest period, but you could try a shorter variety sweet potato such as Tang Ung, which is a 65 to 85-day variety, or also Georgia Jet, which is 80 to 90 days, and that one is even cold tolerant if you're living in a slightly cooler climate than what we have here. Sweet potatoes really love the heat, they love full sun, they don't ever really get any pest pressure except for the occasional Japanese beetle, but these things are so prolific that even Japanese beetles will not overtake them. So sweet potatoes are a very low input crop. After you get these guys planted, they're just gonna grow on their own, and then around September or October, you're gonna start checking them to make sure that they're the right size that you want. You can check them around 90 days for more of that baked potato size, or you can go to the 120 days if you're wanting some really big tubers. But when you harvest these guys, all you're gonna do is just let them dry somewhere outside, and then the next day you'll come, brush off most of that dirt, and then you just bring them into the house, and they will store in your house until the next harvest season. I do let them sit about 1 to 2 weeks before we dig into these guys. That 2-week period is going to allow those carbohydrates and the starches to really convert over to sugar, so you have a super sweet potato and not a starchy one. I really think that sweet potatoes are probably one of the best survival crops that you can grow because they are low input, because they store so well, and also you can go either way with them in your cooking. You can either do something sweet with them, like a sweet potato pie or other types of desserts and sweetbreads. You can use them as just simply a baked sweet potato. You can have sweet potato French fries. We do can some in a simple syrup. That makes it really nice for sweet potato casserole during the holidays. You can also roast them in your oven with a mixture of amaretto liquor and some sugar, and that is absolutely divine. So there's plenty of ways to use these guys. But one thing that you may not be thinking of is that their leaves are also edible. So you can harvest the leaves and freeze them just like you would a spinach. But you can also use them in a stir fry. You can saute them and then serve them up with like some cucumbers and tomatoes in a vinaigrette, sort of as a salad. There are really so many different uses for the leaves as well as for the tubers. So I ended up only getting 16 sweet potato slips planted of the 24 to 32 that I wanted to get in, but that's because I ran out of slips, but that's okay. Up at the house, I have some more sweet potatoes that have some slips on them. I just need to take them off and let them root in water. They're actually pretty quick to do that. It probably takes maybe a week. And we have such a long growing season here in South Carolina that it is okay. I use rock phosphate in a lot of the things that I plant. I think this is probably one of the most critical things that has helped me be successful in growing. Phosphate is really good to help your plants develop roots, and that is what your plants need, in essence, to take up nutrients, to take up water, and to feed themselves so that they can produce a bountiful harvest for you. So I would definitely not skip this step. I got this at my local farmer store last year. It's 5 pounds for $13.99. Don't get it off of Amazon. I think Amazon is a lot more expensive, but if you can find it at a local farm store or maybe order it in like through Tractor Supply or something like that, I think that's gonna be the most cost-effective way to do it. But this stuff is like gold to me because it always just ensures that I get a good harvest on basically everything that I plant, because I put this in every hole of whatever I'm planting. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you learned a little bit from that, and maybe you'll try sweet potatoes this year. But thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.